Chapter 3 Expedition from Earth. A hand appeared, knocking the knife aside. Roughly, the newcomer pulled the attacker away. "All right, Galloway, that's enough. You can see he's not an Exilion. I'm gonna go with Exilion." The man called Galloway stepped back, the killing anger fading from his face. "Aye, you're right. But it was all so quick. He sprung the trap, do you see? And then we were fighting." The newcomer helped the doctor to his feet. "I'm sorry," he said gruffly. "We've had a pretty bad time on this planet. Quite a few of us have been killed. Dan Galloway here tends to attack first and ask questions afterwards. My name's Railton, by the way." Railton. Dusting himself down, the doctor studied the two men. Galloway, the one who'd attacked him, was big and burly, with a barrel chest and great hairy hands. The second man was considerably smaller and several years older, with thinning hair and a lined, careworn face. Both wore astronaut-type uniforms. With military insignia. Both had blasters and knives in their belts. Galloway was carrying a bow, improvised. What? Oh. Galloway was carrying a bow, improvised, the doctor noticed, from a flexible plastic rod. A plastic quiver filled with arrows of sharpened cane hung over his shoulder. Rubbing his bruises, the doctor said ruefully, "I'm the doctor. I can understand how you feel, gentlemen. I was attacked myself as soon as I arrived. Perhaps you can tell me—" Galloway was looking back down the path. "Something moving," he whispered urgently. "Getting closer." Railton tensed. The doctor listened. From around the bend of the path came a faint shuffling sound. Railton said urgently, "You better come back to base with us. We can talk safely there." Galloway was already scrambling over the rocks, moving away from the path. Railton set off after him, and the doctor followed. Soon all three had disappeared amongst the tumbled rocks. Minutes later, a black-cloaked figure appeared. Others followed. They stood for a moment, almost as if sniffing the air, then set off over the rocks after their prey. Galloway led the way over the broken ground at a terrific pace. He doubled back in a wide loop, and soon they were moving along the edge of a low cliff at a point where the rocks bordered the dunes. Galloway made for a shallow niche in the rock face, and the doctor saw that a small plastic survival dome had been erected against the base of the cliff. It was a good position, protected from above by the overhang of the cliff, shielded on each side by the arms of the V-shaped niche. As they headed for the dome, a man with a bow and arrows seemed to rise out of the ground. The doctor looked closer and saw that a protective trench had been dug just for them, just in front of them. At the right of the doctor's companions, the sentry lowered his bow and gave a cheerful grin. He was considerably younger than the other two, with brown hair and a round, cheerful face. Railton returned the wave. "All right, Peter, it's only us. We've got a visitor, but he's quite friendly." "We hope," muttered Galloway. He was still keeping a wary eye on the doctor, his hand close to the hilt of his knife. Railton led the way into the dome, slapping the sentry on the shoulder as he went by. "Keep a sharp lookout, Peter. Dan heard some movement back there." Peter gave a quick salute. "Aye, aye, sir." He sank back into his trench, eyes scanning the broken ground ahead. The doctor looked round the dome. He was in a large circular chamber divided into different sections. There were sleeping bags against the wall, and in the central area there was a scattered pile of partially unpacked crates, which appeared to contain some kind of mining equipment. Near the crates was an assortment of improvised weapons: clubs, spears, slingshots, bows, and arrows, made partly from steel and plastic, partly from wood and rock. On the far side of the dome, screens had been set up, forming a little cubicle. Inside it, on a makeshift bed, lay a heavily bandaged man. A young woman was kneeling beside him, tucking an aerofoil space blanket into place. She straightened up, and at the sight of the others, brushing back fair hair from her forehead. "Who's this? Did you find Jack?" Railton didn't reply, and there was an awkward silence. Then Galloway said brutally, "Aye, we found him, right enough, floating in one of the pools, stuck full of arrows like a hedgehog." The young woman gave a gasp of horror, and Railton said gently, "We buried him out there, Jill. It seemed best." The girl nodded, absorbing the shock. She looked at the doctor. "And who's this, then?" Galloway said, "He calls himself the doctor. We found him out there." "This is Jill Terrance, doctor," said Railton. "She's our mining engineer. The lad on guard outside is Peter Hamilton. There are just the 5 of you, then. There used to be 10, said Galloway bleakly. 2 were killed in that first ambush. 3 more have been picked off since. Railton looked at the man on the bed. He was dozing uneasily. This is Commander Stewart, the leader of our expedition. He was wounded in the first ambush. Commander? Your military expedition, then? Mixed, said Railton. Miss Terrance and I are scientists. The rest are all MSC. The doctor frowned. MSC? Marine Space Corps. Of course, said Galloway. You've plenty of questions, Doctor. Now maybe you'll tell us something about yourself. Where do you come from, and where were you headed when I jumped you? Back to the TARDIS, my spaceship, said the doctor, gave a brief account of his arrival on the planet, the mysterious power failure, and the ambush which had separated him from Sarah. I only hope she had the sense to stay in the ship, he concluded, but I'm afraid Sarah's inclined to be headstrong. By now, she's probably out looking for me. Then she's probably dead by now, said Galloway. The doctor gave him a frown, and Railton said, She might still be all right, Doctor, as long as she's careful. The Exilions are mainly night creatures. Exilions? I take it those are the inhabitants of this planet, the unfriendly gentlemen in the cloaks and hoods? Railton nodded. They usually keep out of sight in the daytime. Maybe they won't find her. Just as long as she doesn't go near the Forbidden City, added Jill. That's guarded day and night. Gloomily, Galloway said, Aye, that's right. Anyone they catch nearby, that's their lot. He made a slashing gesture. We've seen Exilion prisoners be taken from near the East City into a big cavern where most of them live, said Jill. We're not sure, but we think they're sacrificed. The doctor felt somewhat overwhelmed with all this new information, but it was vital that he absorb it as quickly as possible. The more he knew about the planet, the better his chances of finding Sarah and of finally escaping from it altogether. He looked round at the others. I've only just arrived on this singularly unpleasant planet, and you've obviously been here for some time. I'd be very much obliged if you'd tell me all you can. Sarah moved on across the rocky plateau. The sun was up by now, larger and closer than the sun of Earth. It blazed down at her from a coppery sky and reflected upwards from the bare rocks. She could feel their heat through the soles of her shoes. Hot, tired, and thirsty, Sarah stumbled on. Perhaps the city would be a kind of Arabian Nights palace, she thought. There would be cool country yards with gently splashing fountains and white-robed attendants with long, cool drinks in golden goblets. The city was very close now. Its white buildings rose up and up, blotting out the sky. Sarah paused to look again. There was something uncanny about the city, for all its beauty. There seemed to be no windows, no gates or doors. It was as if the city was blind. Sarah hurried on. The last stretch of baking rock seemed endless, but she reached the walls of the city at last. White, smooth, and unbroken, they towered high above her, stretching away on either side as far as she could see. Sarah went right up to the wall and examined it curiously. At this close range, she could see that it was made of enormous blocks, with only the finest of lines to mark the place where one block joined another. The wall was so bright and clean that it might have been built just a few hours ago. There was no dirt or dust, no sign of aging or wear. Here and there, elaborate patterns were cut into the wall. Sarah reached out and touched one of the patterns in front of her. The block on which it was carved was smooth and warm, and it tingled. Sarah snatched her hand away. The wall seemed to carry a mild electric charge. Perhaps that was what repelled the dirt, a kind of self-cleaning device. The people who had built this city must be very advanced indeed. She wished they'd been a bit more generous in the matter of gates and doors. There was something else strange about the wall, a sound, a faint electronic hum. It was as though the entire city was somehow alive. She reached out and touched the wall again and heard a guttural snarl of anger. Sarah whirled around. A group of black-cloaked, black-hooded figures had appeared behind her. She looked round for an escape, but she was surrounded. She backed away fearfully, but the wall of the city was behind her, cutting off her escape. Bony hands outstretched, the horrifying nightmare figures advanced. Every chapter ends with a ... So, the next chapter, chapter 4, The Deadly Arrivals.